What's up, everybody? Welcome to the PickSix podcast, CBS Sports daily NFL podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. It is Friday, June 25th. One more day of being 39 years old, which I'm sure people are tired about hearing on this podcast. Joining me to talk some tight ends, top 10 tight ends, good friend of the show, Jordan Dajani. Jordan, what's up, buddy?
What's going on, Will? Happy birthday, man. I appreciate you having me on to cover these top 10 position groups. Ready to talk some tight ends for sure.
Yeah, let's do it. If you are interested in watching the podcast, you can watch the podcast on YouTube, youtube.com/PickSix, or go to YouTube and search PickSix Podcast. It'll show up. If you hit the subscribe button, you'll get alerts when we go live. Additionally, if you press the like, if you're watching now, hit the like button. That helps us a ton. Do your boys a favor. And in the comments, feel free to tell us who the tight end, the most underrated tight end in football. You tell us that, and we'll give a shirt or something. I don't know what we're gonna do. Anyway, let's get to your top 10 tight ends, Jordan, and we'll start as we have with all these tight ends. Who's the toughest guy to leave off? Because, man, you look at this list and the tight end position, which is kind of been a little bit thin for feels it been, like you'd always have some top tier guys, and then you had Gronk, of course, but it feels like there's a pretty stout group of young tight ends sort of emerging across the NFL. So who was the toughest guy to leave off?
No, you're right. I mean, this was a weirdly deep class. It felt like this was a harder project than I anticipated. There were a couple of guys that were hard to leave off. One was Jonnu Smith, who, of course, is making the leap from the Titans to the Patriots. We ended up including his teammates in this list. We'll get to that. Another that was really surprising is Robert Tonyan from the Packers did not make my top 10. He was more of a touchdown god than a stat guy when it comes to receptions and yards. So that's why he was left off. A couple others, Logan Thomas from the Washington football team was left off. Evan Ingram, Austin Hooper, and I think I didn't say Zach Ertz was another guy. So definitely had some guys that were on the outside looking in that I got plenty of feedback from the fans on Twitter.
Jonnu's one that I probably got to find somebody to leave to take off if you want to put Jonnu Smith on. There's a surprising guy in your top 5, and I don't want to spoil it, but I will say that the best way to say it is that when you did this list, you were doing it not just on performance from last year, but also projecting forward how guys will do in 2021, right?
Correct. That's the biggest part to keep in mind when it comes to this list. The two parts there, how they act as, a complete tight end that includes blocking ability, route running, all the stuff that goes into playing the position, but not, and I also base this list, like as you said, not on the 2020 stats, but their outlook for 2021.
Okay. Because, and we'll get to it. If you're trying to find someone to put on the list, you might say it's too early to do it. But on the other hand, it's possible that you could look very smart in your selection come next year. Another guy, Tyler Higbee, maybe consideration. You mentioned Tonyan. Yeah, I guess it does kind of fall off. Logan Thomas, sort of a sneaky, good developing tight end for the Washington football team as well. But let's get to the list. At number 10, you have Mike Gesicki of the Miami Dolphins. I dig it. Gesicki, I really think you watch it. I mean, I don't know that he's necessarily the most consistent player quite yet, but the Penn State product, we always like to pump up the Penn Staters for our boy Debo. Man, he flashes in a big way. And if Tua Tagovailoa can take a step forward in 2021, I think it'll be in large part because not only the addition of Jalen Waddle, but maybe the continued development of a guy like Gesicki, who has really flashed some elite vertical skill set when it comes to being kind of a touchdown guy.
Yeah, exactly. Gesicki was definitely a guy I wanted to include in my top 10. He ended up coming in at number 10. He put up career numbers all across the board in 2020, 53 receptions, 703 yards, 6 scores. He had the longest reception of any tight end in the NFL last year with a sweet double move against the 49ers with a 70-yard gain. When you say flash, I think that's a great descriptor because if you watch his highlights, he's made some tough catches, some incredible one-handed grabs. He's a guy that works really well out of the slot as well. Now, there's a lot of tight ends on this list that work well in the slot, but this is a guy who almost seemingly specialized in that spot. And he's not a legendary blocker, which why he probably came in at number 10 and not number 9 or 8 to me. But he's somebody who works the middle of the field well. He's versatile. If Tua takes a step forward, like you said, he's going to be a good player. Yes, the Dolphins added some speed on the outside with Jalen Waddle and Will Fuller. That's true. But that could help Gesicki when it comes to working the middle of the field. There were times last year where it seemed like Gesicki saved Tua on some throws. So keep an eye on him. I think that his outlook looks great for 2021. I think that he could be a rising star in this league.
I would agree. I think it's certainly you want to have him on that list. And, I would say maybe a little bit higher, but then when you start to go through the actual guys who are on this list, that I think 10 is actually a pretty good spot just because I think we'll need to see him make that leap before you actually push him any higher than that. At number 9, I think this is interesting because of the lack of Jonnu Smith. Hunter Henry checking in, one of the other signees this offseason for Bill Belichick and the Patriots. I'm really curious to see how they use these two guys because both Jonnu Smith and Henry are capable blockers, and certainly great receivers. Henry maybe more of a red zone threat than Jonnu Smith, I guess. Smith is a beast, and he can certainly catch touchdowns in the red zone. But I mean, he seems like the guy where they'll use him in the backfield, give him carries like the Titans did in sort of funky formations type of stuff. Where Henry's more of a traditional guy that you would line up. You could split him out too, but I think I've always loved Hunter Henry. Loved him coming out of Arkansas. Thought he was going to be an elite tight end with the Chargers, but nobody is ever able to stay healthy with the Chargers. Maybe he will with the Patriots.
Yeah, he was kind of a buzzer beater when it came to putting my top 10 together because Jonnu Smith was the guy, the Patriot that I was going to put in this list. But when you sit down and think about it, Jonnu Smith, his versatility is very attractive. There's no doubt about that. But when creating this list, I was looking at Hunter Henry, who's been more the traditional tight end, and the guy who's had more consistent success in the league. It's not a given that Jonnu Smith is going to take this extra leap forward that many people are anticipating in 2021. So for Hunter Henry, career high 60 passes, 613 yards, 4 scores, nothing crazy. He ranked 5th in receptions per game for tight ends, was a top 10 tight end when it came to fantasy points per game last year. I would expect that to again be the case in 2021. But here's why he made my list, and here's why he comes in at number 9. He's now being coached by Bill Belichick, who has some experience with getting the most out of his star tight ends. Like we said, Hunter Henry is that traditional guy who's going to line up in more traditional roles. What we say traditional like it's an insult, but it's not. I think that he could play a major role in this Patriots offense. They made some additions at wide receiver, not one that's really going to catch your eye, though. So Hunter Henry set up for a lot of success entering 2021. Again, this list is definitely looked on with the outlook of 2021. Jonnu Smith's going to be a fun player to watch, but at the end of the day, when we sit down and look at his stats and how he was used at the end of the season, we might have Hunter Henry ranked above him.
Entirely possible. I love Hunter Henry. It was bitterly disappointing that he couldn't stay healthier than he did with the Chargers. At number 8, former Iowa star standout Noah Fant with the currently with the Denver Broncos. Is he going to? This will be his 3rd year, right? Yes. And we've seen tight ends start slow out of the gate just in terms of performance at the NFL level. Rookie tight ends typically don't have monster seasons for whatever reason. Fant feels like a guy on this Denver offense where even if they aren't able to trade for Aaron Rodgers, if he can get Drew Lock to take a little step forward, Fant could have an enormous year. The one knock would maybe be that they're a little too conservative. This guy's got great after the ball tremendous yak skills, running out, getting the ball in his hands and running. You see me just burst across the field or burst down the sideline. Huge Noah Fant fan.
Yeah, so am I, and I'm glad I could include him in this top 10 list. His rookie year was kind of up and down, and there were some lows that were very worrisome if you're a Broncos fan, but he kind of bounced back and showed that he could be maybe an elite talent in this league. He's just 23 years old, career high 62 catches for 673 yards, 3 scores. He was top 10 in targets per game and receiving yards per game among all tight ends and came in at number 7 among all at his position with 62 catches. So even while the Broncos, this is important, even while the Broncos made it a point to try to get the ball to the rookie wide receiver Jerry Jeudy in 2020, Fant still led Denver in receptions, and as you mentioned, the almighty Yak as well with 372 yards. So this is a guy who has a very high ceiling. There are some worries about how he's going to be used in this offense, but there are instances where he's even been on the receiving end of screens, and he's been absolutely impressive running downfield. So he's a good weapon. He's a complete tight end in my mind. He has a large ceiling. I'm excited to see what he does in the future.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, he may not be the only Iowa tight end on this. I mean, look, it's 1,235, 1,235 yards through his first two seasons. Nothing to sneeze at for a tight end playing with, on a conservative, fairly conservative offense with a questionable quarterback situation. It is possible we see Noah Fant really explode. Yards per reception down a little bit last year, not a ton of touchdowns, but I think he is a definite breakout candidate at the position. At number 7, warming Debo's heart, reminding him that not only do they have Dallas Goedert on the roster, they still have Zach Ertz on the roster, and he's not on the list, by the way. But Dallas Goedert, still only 26 years old. It feels like he's been around for a little bit longer for some reason. Fourth-year player. Do you think does Ertz need to go for Goddard to have a full-time breakout?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, he's still going to be a good player if Zach Ertz is on roster, but this is going to be the guy who's going to be the new Ertz, the new tight end one moving forward in Philly. Why I have him at number 7 on our list is 2 reasons. I think he's a complete tight end, but also I do anticipate Ertz probably could be playing football elsewhere in 2021. So if you're a fantasy football fan, Goddard's already a top 10 tight end. He finished number 9 when it came to points per game scored. He also came in 5th among all tight ends with 47.64 receiving yards per game. And that figure I expect to grow in 2021. The other part is I added that he's a complete, tight end. His blocking ability is impressive. He takes that aspect of his game very seriously. He can impact games even when he's not running routes. So he's not the fastest tight end. He's not the most athletic guy on the field, but he has great size. And something I noticed in the film is that he continues to find ways to get open and make life easier on his quarterback, working the middle of the field. And if you come at him with a weak tackle, he's going to shake you off and get some yak off that reception as well. So I like Dallas Goedert as well. It does seem like he's been around for forever, but he continues to get better. And I expect if Ertz is not on the roster come week 1, then we're expecting him to have a breakout year, definitely a top 10 guy.
Fun fact about Dallas Goedert. It's just not really fun. It's just an interesting fact. He is the only tight end with a PFF grade in both receiving and run blocking over 80 every year since 2018. And he ranks first in run blocking since then. That includes George Kittle, which is kind of crazy. Kittle, of course, deal with some injuries, so maybe that knocks him down. Sometimes those things are cumulative. But the point being is Dallas Goedert, if Zach Ertz gets dealt or cut or just isn't around, at some point we're going to see a full season of Dallas Goedert. They need to get him a better quarterback situation, but he could absolutely be a breakout star and deserving of this spot at number 7. At number 6, a guy who was a freaking fantasy monster when Lamar Jackson broke out for his MVP season, Mark Andrews of the Ravens.
Yep, I got a lot of flack for this placement. A lot of people wanted him higher than 6 or, lower, whatever, in the top 5, if you will. I mean, in Lamar Jackson's MVP campaign, he was incredible. 852 yards receiving, 10 touchdowns, led the team in receiving, obviously. Even while Hollywood Brown was Baltimore's leading wideout this past season, Andrews was by far the more consistent target. 58 catches, 701 yards, 7 touchdowns. And, there's a couple reasons he comes in at 6 or not number 5 on my list. And that's, the Ravens, they added receiver talent for Lamar Jackson in free agency and through the draft. It'll be up to Lamar Jackson with how successful he is utilizing that new talent out wide. Either way, Mark Andrews is going to be that security blanket. He's a target that Lamar Jackson is familiar with. He's more comfortable throwing the ball down the field towards the middle of the field instead of on the outside. Mark Andrews is going to make an impact on this game. There's no doubt about it. His blocking ability is not A+. It's good. But Mark Andrews probably, I think that's a reason he came in at number 6 on my list as well. He's been a consistent player. He's still young. He's an athletic freak, great hands. But he comes in at number 6 for me.
So I just, looking at Mark Andrews and thinking about the 2018 NFL draft, I mean, the Ravens got Hayden Hurst and Lamar Jackson in the first round, had no second-round picks. They traded up to get Lamar Jackson. And then in the third round, picked up Orlando Brown Jr. and Mark Andrews. I realize that 2 of those guys are no longer on the team, but Orlando Brown netted them a first rounder this year, and Hayden Hurst, they got a second rounder from the Falcons in return. That is ridiculous to load up your offense like that in that single draft. And it really, that was Ozzie Newsome's final draft. And man, I'll tell you what, he left Eric DaCosta some nice little toys to deal with, or to deal as he did. And Andrews in the third round there at 86 overall out of Oklahoma, along with his teammate Orlando Brown in that third round, was a nice pull. And Andrews just been at 20 touchdowns in 3 years, has been a beast in the red zone. All right, coming up, let's take a quick break. But after the break, we'll tell you what tight end without a single snap in the NFL made Jordan's list. Next. Okay, this is not the guy with no snaps. This is, I think, if I were going to pick a guy to challenge for the number one, well, not number one, but challenge to break into the top 3, because you can probably, if you listen to this podcast, if you listen to this podcast, presumably you follow the NFL to some small degree. And if you follow the NFL to some small degree, also presumably you can guess who the top 2 tight ends are, and probably even guess number 3. But if I had to pick one guy to break in to the top 3, it would be TJ Hawkinson, an absolute animal for the Detroit Lions. My only question with TJ Hawkinson is that he no longer has Matthew Stafford and had to downgrade Jared Goff, but he might lead this team in targets and catches this year.
I think so. And I'm glad you agree with me. I'm very high on him entering 2021 as well. I mean, last year, which was his first full season, he ranked 4th among all tight ends in receptions, 3rd in yards, tied for 9th in touchdowns. He was dangerous working the middle of the field and effective in the red zone. He's also a solid blocker, so that's going to get kudos for me when it comes to placement on my list. So, to address what you kind of brought up very quickly, some may think Hawkinson's stock could drop a bit in 2021 considering he lost quarterback Matthew Stafford, but you have to remember that the Lions downgraded in a big way at the wide receiver position, right? Losing Marvin Jones Jr., losing Kenny Galladay. In comes Brashad Perryman, Tyrell Williams, and then maybe the rookie Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're probably going to be the top wideouts. To me, that completely leaves the door open for Hawkinson to be Detroit's leading receiver in 2021. He's dynamic. He's athletic. He knows how to work certain and different parts of the field. But more importantly, he's working with a new quarterback. He doesn't necessarily have as much chemistry as he had with Matthew Stafford. Tight ends obviously serve that role as security blankets, and he's a guy who's more than a security blanket. He's somebody who could also serve as the focal point of your offense moving forward. I expect him to make a big jump. That's why he's in my top 5 entering 2021.
Look, Hawkinson's a beast. Again, the only reason I don't think that he could make, the only reason I would question whether or not he could make the leap is the golf thing, and just what is this offense going to look like, with Dan Campbell and Anthony Lynn running things. But again, they just don't have anybody at receiver to catch the ball. Hawkinson saw 101 targets last year for the Lions, 723 receiving yards. He's a red zone beast. He's physical as heck. George Kittle, friend of the program, George Kittle, was on the PickSix podcast when we were in Atlanta and was talking about those Fant and Hawkinson. It was like, dude, Hawkinson, Fant's more of a receiver, maybe, closer to the modern day wideout tight end and he pointed out that Hawkinson is very much in his same mold, just in terms of being an absolute animal blocking and very capable in the receiving game as well. It would not shock me at all if he was a top 3 tight end by the time that the season ends. Now here's where we get the controversy. At number 4, you have the Atlanta Falcons tight end Kyle Pitts. He hasn't taken a snap. He doesn't have a catch. Jordan, what has the response been to this to put him above, I don't want to say luminaries, but some fairly big tight end names here?
I definitely got some responses, and I read some Facebook comments. I know we're not supposed to do that, but I read some Facebook comments about this list. A lot of people talking about, why did I place Kyle Pitts on this list? I mean, listen, okay, he got 43 passes, 770 yards, 12 touchdowns in 8 games last year for the Gators. Unanimous All-American, best tight end in college, blah, blah. His college career was great. But listen, he fits this new generation of tight end, right? He runs routes and makes catches like a wide receiver, possesses the kind of athleticism that will allow him to stand out immediately. He won't be an elite blocker year 1, but that's something where he's going to put the work in. The reason I have Pitt so high on this list is because the Falcons are going to make him a focal point of their offense, especially with Julio Jones gone. And Arthur Smith, the new first-year head coach, he knows how to do that. He's a former tight ends coach. So the thing is, Kyle Pitts comes into this league with extremely high expectations. But when we take a step back following his rookie year and examine his stats along with the highlight reel plays, such as we do when we create this offseason list, I believe that you're going to sit down and say, okay, he's definitely a top 5 tight end already. We're talking about tight ends, and obviously the sexy part about it is the receiving stats. Looks like he's going to do well there. He'll probably be top 4 when it comes to receiving yards just from tight ends in 2021. And I even went back to the experts at CBS Sports Fantasy, right? They have him 6th in yards after his rookie season, 5th in touchdowns, and 5th in fantasy points when it comes to tight ends. So I'm not that far off there. The potential is there, and we think receiving stats obviously are more important when it comes to these tight end rankings. He's going to be up there. He might not exceed the lofty expectations he's shouldering when he enters the Atlanta Falcons facility, but this is going to be a good tight end in the NFL in my mind.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at the guys you left off, like Jonnu Smith, again, has been a very good tight end, but you're not going to lose sleep over not ranking Jonnu Smith in your top 10 tight ends. You might lose some sleep. You might catch some flack. You could have gotten away with it, by the way, because he's a rookie. Like, you could have just left him off and nobody would have said boo about it. But I do like the idea that you're saying, no, we're projecting. I think he's going to be this good. He's going to put up these kind of stats. And I want to be right next year if I'm doing this list again, when I go back and look and say, I had Kyle Pitts 4 and I was correct. And even if he ends up being like the 6th best tight end in football, or even the 7th best tight end in football, you're probably not going to be that far off. So I dig it. And the Julio factor really is the selling point, I think, because there's a decent chance that Kyle Pitts sees, 90 targets next year, 100. I mean, Julio's targets got to go somewhere, and it can't all go to Russell Gage and Calvin Ridley. So Kyle Pitts should be very active for the Atlanta Falcons in the receiving game. Now, this is where it gets very easy. Honestly, like, we'll do the final 3, just bang, 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 because actually, you know what? No, we won't do that. At 3, because I think 1 and 2, you could at least have a conversation on. 3, Darren Waller, he just slots into 3. Yeah, probably the second best receiving tight end, I guess. I mean, he is an absolute monster for the Raiders, and the usage and the way that Derek Carr leans on him and his ability to be a threat in the red zone, to get yak, to run good routes. The guy's just developed really well in that offense, got paid for it, and deservedly so. I think just because of the guys who are above him, it's just maybe even the easiest slot to make for these tight ends, because he's elite. He's not quite the top 2. He just slides easily into 3.
Yep. He led all tight ends in receptions with 107, came in 2nd in receiving yards. He came in at number 10 overall in the NFL in receiving yards when you throw in wide receivers as well. So only one of 2 tight ends to do that. I mean, he's been the Raiders' leading receiver for 2 seasons now. He probably could make it 3 in 2021. Anyone who's that athletic, standing at 6'6" is capable of really anything on offense. So he's high on this list for good reason.
Yeah. He's a beast. It's easy. And then 1 and 2, shocking. Yeah. Sometimes these lists are easy, right? The top of these lists sometimes are easy anyway. George Kittle at 2 and Travis Kelce at 1. I'll ask you this. Was there any consideration to shaking things up and putting Kittle at number 1, or did the injuries and the fact that Kelce had another historical tight end season just make it too easy to put Travis Kelce 1?
Yeah, I definitely thought about it, and I'll get more into that when we talk about Kelce at 1. But yeah, George Kittle comes in at number 2 for me. Dominant as both a receiver and blocker. That's important as a tight end. He was limited to just 8 games played in 2020 due to injury. I expect a big bounce back season. He did have that record-breaking season for a tight end in 2018 with over 1,300 yards receiving, 5 scores. Then he had 1,053 yards and 5 scores in 2019, helped the 49ers get to the Super Bowl. I guess I'll describe him as a dual threat weapon as a tight end, someone who can block very well, being a big time playmaker down the field. George Kittle is very great. I wanted to put him number 1, but Travis Kelce just doesn't stop. He just doesn't regress. Every year we think he's going to take a step backwards as he gets older, and that hasn't happened. So I can't put him at number 2 right now. So Travis Kelce, of course, is my number 1.
Yeah, and look, I mean, Travis Kelce, his stats it's kind of a joke. I think somebody was trying to maybe, I'm trying to think what the argument was, whether it was like Kelce. I mean, I think you could almost say that if Travis Kelce, I don't know if he retires today, I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer. Maybe that's a stretch, but over the last 5 years, his per Well, actually, yeah, he played 15.6 games on average. Maybe he misses a game because of, it wasn't an injury. It was because I think, they sat everybody down at the end of the season because they had the seed locked in. So let's do his per 16 game averages just to make it fair, because there's really only one game that he's had 15 games in 2 of those seasons. And again, I'm pretty sure it's because they sat people to avoid injuries. So per 16 game numbers, 137 targets, 97 catches, 1,260 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Averages per 16 game over a 5-year span. His actual averages, the actual numbers over those time, 95 catches, 1,229 yards, and 7.6 touchdowns. 13 yards per catch. The dude is ridiculous. I get that he's not maybe the world's best blocker or whatever you want to say. He's not Gronk. He's not Kittle. He's fine, can block. As a receiver, he is absolutely unstoppable, Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, like the usage is important, but the fact that he doesn't slow down. I mean, even after 4 straight seasons of posting more than 1,000 yards receiving, he had, I think, what was his best campaign in 2020, 105 catches, record-breaking 1,416 yards, 11 touchdowns. All 3 of those figures set career highs when he plays his oldest season in the NFL, the oldest player he's going to be up to this point. I mean, he's then set the record for most receptions in a conference championship game with 13, past Gronk for the most receiving yards by a tight end in a single season in NFL history when including playoffs. I can't expect a regression because we just haven't seen any signs of that moving forward. And when I spoke to him earlier this offseason, he told me that he's hungrier than he ever was to win the Super Bowl. He wants the second one more than he wants his first one. And we saw comments come out this week saying he described the 2020 campaign as a failure because the Chiefs didn't win the Super Bowl. It's Super Bowl or bust for Kansas City. They're more motivated than ever. That loss against Tampa Bay definitely lit a fire under them. So don't expect Kelce to regress here in 2021.
No. Kelce's just going to keep pouring it on. I mean, he's going to play for a while. He's going to be with Patrick Mahomes for a while. He's going to be in Andy Reid's offense for a while. He loves it there. It's kind of, it's a little similar to the Patriots in terms of you would see guys go to New England and just hang out and even playing for, it's like a sunshine version of New England. You're going to go and play. If you're good, you're going to go and play for the Chiefs. You're going to get paid. Andy Reid's fun to be with. He knows the offense. Kelce is a guy who had some off-field issues and troubles coming out of Cincinnati, has really, I don't want to say cleaned up his act, but under Andy Reid, he's certainly matured. I mean, he's still doing like dating shows and all this stuff, but he's become just one of the biggest receiving threats in all of football. I saw a stat where I believe only Golden Tate and Jarvis Landry have forced more missed tackles over the last 5 years than Travis Kelce. He's a tight end. It's ridiculous. And George Kittle, George Kittle missed time last year. Probably the most complete tight end in the NFL, just from a blocking standpoint. And I would argue that what makes Kelce and Kittle, and again, it could be 1A and 1B if you wanted to, what makes Kelce and Kittle so special is that, and interesting, is that they are kind of you have to have the quarterback, of course, but I think Kelce and Kittle are kind of the fulcrums for their respective offenses. I don't know that Kyle Shanahan's offense works the way it does without a guy like Kelce who can, because you want the play action feeds off of the run game, right? Because you want it to look similar. And because Kittle's such a dominant blocker, and then he can quickly release and get out when it's a play action situation. Then Kelce, you move him all over the place and he's getting wide open, and it forces teams to decide, like, are you going to guard Travis Kelce or are you going to deal with Tyreek Hill? Good luck doing both. You can't. It's easy choices up top, unbelievable players, and unbelievable podcast from you, Jordan. Great list. I like it.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, buddy. We will talk linebackers with you later on as well. Thanks for listening. That's the top 10 tight ends with Jordan Dajani.